For 8.2, we are going to be talking about using a Marxist literary lens. And if several of those words don't really mean anything to you, that's fine. That's what we are talking about. By the end of this video, you should understand what a Marxist literary lens is and be able to read Chapter 2 of Mice and Men, applying this literary lens. So, first off, what do I mean by a literary lens? Literary lenses are different ways of looking at the deeper meaning in literature. They are called literary theories in addition to literary lenses. The two can be used interchangeably. And these are developed by scholars who have made observations about how our society works and how literature reflects our society. Because, of course, literature, writing, stories, they don't just appear. They come from people, and people are shaped by societies, and societies are created by people. So, writing in many ways is a reflection of and a commentary on society. So, literary lenses let us focus on different aspects of society to examine literature. We are going to be looking at three specific literary lenses in this unit, although there are many more. The three that we are looking at are the Marxist lens, which we will talk about today, the feminist lens, which we'll look at in 8.3, and the social justice lens, which we will look at in 8.4. So when you're thinking of literary lenses, you can imagine them using the analogy of a pair of glasses, literal lenses. When you see the world through glasses, it is the same world, but it looks a little different depending on the type of glasses you're wearing. Sunglasses will make it darker, maybe easier to look at. Reading glasses might make it more clear or blurrier if you've got the wrong prescription. 3D glasses at a movie is going to make it look totally different. Rose-tinted glasses will make everything look a lovely pink. So it's the same thing with our literary lenses. When we are looking at a text, we can look at the same exact text through different literary lenses, and even though it's the same story, we will see it a little bit differently. That brings us to our first lens, Marxism or Marxist theory. Marxism is named after the German scholar Karl Marx, who lived from 1818 to 1883. And there's a lot that could be said about him, but we are specifically going to be looking at his theories on social structure and class and how it can be applied to literature and stories, such as of Mice and Men. So the Marxist lens is focused on social class and social power. How do humans relate to each other? Who has power and who doesn't? And who gets to make the rules anyway? Marxist theory divides humans broadly into three social classes. First, you have what are called the proletariat. This is the biggest class, and it is made up of normal folks. We would also call this working class. So these are people who are just living their lives, working jobs. Again, the vast majority of people belong to the proletariat. One step higher on the class ladder, you have the bourgeois. Long French word, don't worry about all those vowels. The bourgeois refers to rich people. These you can think of as upper class people. Many of them still work, but unlike the proletariat, they don't rely on their work in order to survive. They aren't just working paycheck to paycheck. They have money to spare. They're not so worried about those smaller needs. But they're not the top of the ladder. At the very top, we have the aristocracy. And these are people who are not only rich, they are powerful. You might recognize that crassy suffix from words like democracy, a type of government. Aristocracy shares that same suffix because it is referring to a form of power. In a democracy, demo means people, so a democracy is a government ruled by the people. Everyone gets to vote and have a say in the government, even if you are part of the proletariat. In an aristocracy, The government is controlled just by the most rich and powerful. The clearest examples of aristocracies are things like monarchies, where there is a king or queen, some royal class in charge. So these are the three classes. Again, most people are proletariat, then there's a smaller group of the bourgeois, and a very, very small group of the aristocracy, who have by far the most wealth and power. They are the 1%. So when we're looking at Marxist theory, we can identify these three classes, and then we use these classes to understand how society works. Here are some key ideas of Marxist theory. The first is that we must pay attention to material conditions of our life. Our finances, our comfort, our home, our food, these day-to-day physical things. We have to pay attention to them, and we have to engage our attitudes about those conditions to achieve positive social change. That is, he's saying, don't just accept life the way it is. If your life is full of struggle and hardship, you have to pay attention to that and be aware of that in order to push for something better. The second key idea is that the class structure, the proletariat, bourgeois, and aristocracy, is built on the oppression of workers. That this class structure can only exist because that small group of people at the very top is taking advantage of the big group of people that are being kept at the bottom. And as a result of this, the different classes are in conflict. They want different things. The proletariat wants working conditions to improve, for their lives to be better. Makes sense. But the aristocracy doesn't actually want that. They want things to stay as they are to maintain their power. So how do we apply this to literature? Well, let's take a very simple and slightly silly example. You might know the children's story, the song about the itsy bitsy spider. This little spider climbs up the water spout, down came the rain and washed the spider out. And this spider keeps trying to climb but keeps getting washed down. It's a very simple story. We can view it through this Marxist lens. If we do so, the spider represents the proletariat. It is the powerless common folk that's trying to climb up the water spout and improve its life. The water spout, therefore, can be seen as a metaphor or a symbol for the American dream, this idea that even a lowly spider can work hard by climbing their way up and achieve something great. But unfortunately, the American dream is not all that it seems. In this case, the rain is the bourgeois, the bourgeoisie is the class term that pushes the spider back down, oppresses the spider to keep it at the bottom so that they can stay up at the top. And the sun, well, the sun seems like a good friend. It's making things easier for the spider, but ultimately it's just providing false hope, making the spider think it can climb up. But in reality, every time it climbs, it's going to get washed down again. So again, that's kind of over the top, applying Marxist theory to a children's song, but also it's not. It makes sense. This can be applied to understand some ways that our society functions. So whenever we are trying to apply a Marxist lens to a literary text, whether that is Itsy Bitsy Spider, Of Mice and Men, or whatever story or text you are looking at, there are some central questions that we can ask. One main one is, who is in power? Who has control? Who calls the shots? Related to that, but a little harder to think about, who benefits the most if the work is successful or if the effort is accepted? Is it the workers who are benefiting the most, or is it the bosses who own the company? Third, we can ask, which class does the work claim to represent? Again, is the work the property of the workers, or does it belong to the bosses? And then, in general, what values does the work reinforce, and what values does it subvert, does it repress? So looking at values like independence versus community, kindness versus profit, all of these different values. Let's come a bit closer to home to wrap things up. If we apply the Marxist lens to Cooper, it's not a story, but it is part of society, we can start to look at how different groups at Cooper, like students, teachers, and administration, could be mapped onto these three different classes. The proletariat, remember that is the biggest group with the least amount of power. The bourgeois, who have more wealth and power and are a slightly bigger group, and the aristocracy, who have the most power, they're the smallest group, and they get to make the rules. So in your packet notes, think about which group at Cooper is most similar to each of Marx's three classes and why. Make sure you finish filling out your 8.2 notes. Feel free to go back to parts of this video if you need to. And next, you'll be reading Chapter 2 of Mice and Men and applying some of these questions. So as you read, put the Marxist lens on and focus on where we see power, class, and this conflict between the workers and the bosses. I hope you find something interesting.